Our caregiver discovers lies and a cruel plot against the millionaire's mother. Armed with secret proof, she confronts a ruthless daughter-in-law who will stop at nothing. But it's when the millionaire himself returns in disguise to save his mother that the truth explodes, and no lie survives the final confrontation. If you found this story interesting, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Let's continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. A grey morning dawned over Chicago, with that typical heavy sky that seemed to weigh on the shoulders of those hurrying through the streets. Megan Oliver held the strap of her purse tightly as she stepped off the bus on Michigan Avenue, feeling the cold of the fine drizzle on her face. She was 32, but her brown eyes, which no longer sparkled, as they once did, seemed to carry the weariness of a lifetime. Since she was 15, when she lost her parents in circumstances she preferred not to revisit in her memory, she had taken on the responsibility of caring for her younger brother, Liam, who was now 23, and worked as an app-based delivery driver on the city's south side. Megan was a domestic worker, not the type who did odd jobs here and there, but a dedicated professional who treated each house as if it were her own, each employer with respect even when that respect was not returned. On that June morning, however, something different awaited her. Valerie, her boss at a middle-class home in Lincoln Park, had called the day before with an unusual proposal. A friend of hers, Beatrice Alden Brandon, needed someone to replace an employee who had suddenly left. The job would be temporary, perhaps 2 or 3 weeks, but the pay would be generous, very generous, enough to pay off the overdue bills piling up on the small table in the living room of the cramped apartment she shared with Liam. She couldn't refuse, even knowing that Liam depended on her for many things, even knowing she had promised to be there for his birthday that week. Megan accepted. The money was too necessary. The electricity bill was late, the rent was due in a few days, and there was still the debt at the neighborhood grocery store. Sacrifices were part of her routine, something she had learned far too early. The address Valerie gave her was in Kenwood, one of Chicago's most affluent neighborhoods. Megan took the L train to the Fullerton station, and from there walked about 15 minutes observing the tree-lined streets, the high walls, and the imposing gates that hid otherworldly mansions. When she finally arrived at the indicated number, she paused for a moment and took a deep breath. The wrought-iron gate was enormous, with golden details that gleamed even in the dim morning light. Beside it, a discreet plaque bore the family's surname engraved in elegant letters, Brandon. Megan pressed the doorbell and waited. The voice that answered through the intercom was polite, but cold. She introduced herself, mentioned Valerie's name, and the gate slowly opened with a mechanical sound that echoed down the empty street. The front garden was immaculate, with trimmed grass, sculpted bushes, and a stone fountain in the center. The house was majestic, with 3 floors, huge windows, and a beige facade that conveyed sophistication and distance. The main door was opened by a woman in a grey uniform who gestured quickly for Megan to enter. The interior of the house was even more impressive. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, furniture that looked like it came from a design magazine. But there was something in the air, a coldness, a rigidity, as if every object was there only to be admired, never touched. Beatrice Alden Brandon appeared at the top of the stairs. A few minutes later, she was a woman of about 45, slim, very well dressed in a flawless beige suit, her blonde hair tied in an elegant bun. Her face was beautiful, but her eyes were hard, calculating. She descended the steps slowly, as if making a point of being watched, and stopped in front of Megan with a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Good morning. You must be Megan. Valerie spoke very highly of you. I hope you're prepared. The work here requires discretion, punctuality, and above all, obedience." Megan felt a shiver run down her spine, but she nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I'm ready for whatever is necessary." Beatrice led her down the main hallway, explaining the house rules in a polished voice laced with a veiled threat. Strict schedules, no using her cell phone during work hours, no talking to other employees beyond what was strictly necessary, and most importantly, absolute secrecy about everything that happened inside that house. Megan's job would be to care for Mrs. Helen Brandon, Beatrice's mother-in-law. The elderly woman lived on the second floor in a room at the back of the house. Beatrice explained that Helen had delicate health problems, requiring controlled medication, a specific diet, and constant rest. Her son, Robert Brandon, was on an extended business trip in Europe, handling matters for the family company. He called frequently, but Beatrice assured him that everything was under control. Megan followed Beatrice up the stairs, feeling the weight of the silence that dominated the second floor. The hallway was dark, with little natural light. Beatrice stopped in front of a solid wooden door and took a key from her pocket. "She's in here. She doesn't like light, so the curtains are always closed. The medication is in this box. The schedules are written down. Don't change anything. Don't give more. Don't give less. Follow exactly what is prescribed. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am." Beatrice unlocked the door and pushed it open. The room was plunged into semi-darkness. The smell was heavy, a mix of mold, medicine, and stagnant air. It took Megan a few seconds for her eyes to adjust to the gloom. In the center of the room, on an old, dark wood bed, lay a small, still figure. "Mrs. Brandon, you have a new caregiver. Megan will be with you for a few weeks." There was no response, only a low, almost inaudible groan. Beatrice left the room without further explanation, closing the door behind her and leaving Megan alone with the elderly woman. She approached slowly, trying to see better. Helen must have been around 70, but she looked much older. Her face was pale, marked by deep wrinkles, her lips chapped, her white hair disheveled. Her hands, thin as twigs, trembled slightly on the worn sheet. Megan felt a tightness in her chest. "Good morning, Mrs. Brandon. My name is Megan. I'm going to take care of you." The elderly woman turned her face toward the voice, and Megan saw her eyes. They were dull, but there was something there. A distant spark, a silent plea for help. For the first few days, Megan followed Beatrice's instructions to the letter. She administered the medicine at the scheduled times, offered the light meals that were left on a tray at the door, and helped Helen with basic hygiene. But something didn't make sense. The food was insufficient, the water restricted, the medication seemed excessive, and the room, that dark, stuffy room, was almost a prison. Megan began to observe. She noticed that Beatrice entered the room several times a day, always, with her cell phone in hand, typing messages with a cynical smile on her lips. She noticed that Helen, in the rare moments she was more lucid, tried to speak, but the words came out confused, truncated, as if something was preventing her from expressing herself clearly. On the fourth day, Megan gathered her courage. She waited for Beatrice to leave for a meeting downtown and opened the heavy curtains in the room. Light flooded the space, revealing the accumulated dirt in the corners, the dust on the furniture, the damp stains on the walls. Helen blinked several times, bothered, but then something changed in her face. It was as if the light had awakened something dormant inside her. Megan approached and held the elderly woman's frail hand. "Mrs. Brandon, are you all right? Can you hear me?" Helen squeezed her hand with surprising strength and whispered, her voice hoarse and weak, "Help me." Those two words changed everything. Megan felt her heart race. "What's happening here, Mrs. Brandon?" The elderly woman tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Her eyes, however, said it all. Fear, desperation, imprisonment. Megan began to investigate discreetly. She checked the medicine box and realized that some dosages were very high, especially the sedatives. She looked at the attached prescriptions and saw they were always signed by the same doctor, a Dr. Maurice Evans. She looked him up on her phone and discovered he had a controversial history, with old malpractice allegations that had been hushed up. She also began to care for Helen differently. She brought fruit hidden in her purse, offered more water, helped the elderly woman sit up in bed, and move her arms and legs. The response was almost immediate. Helen began to regain strength, to speak more clearly, to smile, timidly, and it was in one of these lucid moments that Helen revealed the truth. "She's keeping me prisoner here, Megan. My son knows nothing. She answers his messages pretending to be me. He thinks I'm fine, just tired. But I'm not sick. She's drugging me. She wants to have me declared incompetent, to take everything." Megan felt her blood run cold. Why? Why would she do that? Helen took a deep breath and then explained. Beatrice married Robert for his money. He's a good, hard-working man, but blind to her true nature. She wants to control the family fortune, and I am the only obstacle. If I'm deemed incapacitated, she takes over everything. And your son doesn't suspect? He trusts her. He always has. She's very clever, Megan, very dangerous. Helen then revealed that she kept a hidden diary, a notebook where she wrote down everything that happened in the moment she managed to be lucid. It was hidden inside an old book on a dusty shelf in the corner of the room. Megan found the diary that same night. The pages were filled with distressing accounts. Dates, times, descriptions of emotional abuse, reports on the manipulation of medications, on the veiled threats, on the forced isolation. It was damning evidence. But Megan knew she needed more. She needed something irrefutable. That's when Liam called. His voice was strange, tense. "Meg, something weird happened today." "What, Liam?" "Some guy approached me on the street, said he'd pay me good money if I convinced you to quit this new job. I got scared. I didn't take anything. But I thought it was weird. Who are these people, Megan?" Megan felt the ground open up beneath her feet. Someone was trying to get her away. Someone knew she was discovering too much. "Stay away, Liam. Don't take money from anyone. Don't talk to anyone. I'll handle this. But what's going on?" "I'm not sure yet, but it's something big. Very big." That night, Megan barely slept in the maid's room she had been assigned. Every noise made her heart race. She knew she was entering dangerous territory, but she couldn't back down now. Helen needed her, and Megan, who had spent her entire life sacrificing for others, had finally found a cause worth fighting for. The next day, while cleaning a forgotten utility room at the back of the house, Megan found a dusty cardboard box. Inside, a yellowed envelope addressed to Robert Brandon, with no return address. Inside the envelope, a flash drive. With trembling hands, Megan took the flash drive and hid it in her pocket. She needed to find out what was on it, but she knew she couldn't use any of the house's computers. She would have to wait until her day off. When Beatrice entered the utility room minutes later, Megan had a cloth in her hand, pretending to clean the shelves. "What are you doing here?" "Cleaning, ma'am. You asked me to organize." Beatrice looked at her suspiciously but said nothing. She just turned and left, leaving Megan alone with her heart still pounding. The following days were filled with growing tension. Megan continued to care for Helen, now with even more dedication. The elderly woman was visibly better, stronger, more lucid. And this did not go unnoticed. Beatrice began to watch Megan with predatory eyes. She asked subtle questions, appeared in the room without warning, checked the medication schedules. The net was closing in. And then, on a rainy July night, everything fell apart. Megan had managed to view the contents of the flash drive on Liam's phone during her day off. They were audio files, recorded conversations between Beatrice and the doctor, discussions about changing dosages, forging documents, threatening employees who asked too many questions. There were also records of suspicious bank transfers, fake invoices, all meticulously organized by someone who clearly wanted to expose the truth. Determined to confront Beatrice with the evidence, Megan returned to the mansion that night. She waited for everyone to fall asleep and went down to the office on the first floor. The door was ajar. With her heart in her throat, Megan entered. The office was luxurious, with mahogany bookshelves, a huge desk, and expensive paintings on the walls. Megan opened the drawers one by one, looking for documents, anything that could corroborate what was in the audio files. And she found it. Forged medical prescriptions, incompetency documents already drafted, just waiting for a judge's final signature. Drafts of power of attorney documents that would give Beatrice full control over Helen's assets. It was all true. All of it. Megan was photographing the documents with her phone when she heard the voice behind her. "What do you think you're doing?" Beatrice was standing in the doorway, wearing a silk robe, a frigid expression on her face. Beside her, two uniformed security guards. Megan tried to explain, tried to talk about Helen, about the evidence, but Beatrice wouldn't listen. She accused her of theft, invasion of privacy, espionage. The guards grabbed her by the arms and dragged her out of the office. "You don't know who you're messing with, girl. Get out of my house now before I call the police and finish you and your little brother." Megan was thrown out in the middle of the night in the pouring rain, her purse tossed onto the wet sidewalk. She was shaking, not from the cold, but from anger and helplessness. But she still had the flash drive. She still had the photos of the documents. And now, more than ever, she was determined to see justice done. She returned home soaked, to find Liam awake and worried. She told him everything, showed him the evidence, and together they decided they couldn't give up. 3 days passed. 3 days of anguish, waiting, and uncertainty. Megan tried calling the number for Robert Brandon that Helen had mentioned, but the line was always busy or went straight to voicemail. Until on the morning of the 3rd day, Megan's phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was weak, almost a whisper. "Megan, it's me. Clara, the housemaid." Megan remembered her, a young, shy girl who worked in the kitchen. "Clara, what happened?" "They fired me, said I knew too much. But before I left, I managed to get Mrs. Brandon's cell phone. She's doing very badly, Megan. They increased her medication dosage. She barely wakes up anymore. I think they're going to do something worse." Megan felt panic take over. "Where are you?" "In hiding. I'm scared, but I called because I thought you needed to know. Mrs. Brandon asked for you before she passed out. Clara, can you call her son? Can you notify anyone?" "I tried, but the number I have doesn't work. I think she gave out a fake number." Megan hung up the phone and looked at Liam. "We have to go back there now." Liam shook his head. "Meg, it's dangerous. They could have you arrested. They could hurt you." "I can't let her die, Liam. I can't." And so that night Megan and Liam returned, to Kenwood. They jumped the back wall of the mansion, entered through the utility area. The house was silent, but a light was on the 2nd floor. They went up the stairs quietly. When they reached Helen's room, they found the door locked. Liam forced the lock with a tool he had brought. The door swung open. Helen was lying there, pale, her lips purple, her breathing weak and irregular. Megan ran to her, held her face, called her name. "Mrs. Brandon, hang on. We're going to get you out of here." But then they heard footsteps in the hallway. Beatrice appeared in the doorway, this time accompanied by 2 much larger security guards. "You've broken into my house. This is a crime." Megan stood in front of Helen. "I've called an ambulance. She needs help." "You're not doing anything." But Megan had already pressed the button, and in the following minutes, as Beatrice screamed and the guards tried to intimidate them, sirens began to echo down the street. The ambulance arrived. The paramedics entered, assessed Helen, and rushed her away. Beatrice tried to stop them, claiming to be the legal guardian, but Megan showed the photos of the documents to the health professionals, explaining the situation. They decided to take the patient anyway, given the severity of her condition. Megan and Liam were escorted off the property by the police, who arrived shortly after. They gave their statements, handed over the initial evidence, but they knew this was just the beginning. Mrs. Helen was safe, but the battle for justice was just getting started. St. Luke's Medical Center, on the south side of Chicago, was quiet in the early hours of the morning. Megan paced back and forth in the ICU hallway, her eyes red with exhaustion and worry. Liam sat in a hard plastic chair, his head resting against the wall, trying to rest but unable to. It was almost 4 in the morning when the doctor finally came through the double doors, pulling the surgical mask from his face. Megan stood up immediately, her heart pounding. "Doctor, how is she?" The doctor, a middle-aged man with deep circles under his eyes, sighed before answering. "She's stable, but her condition is serious. We found extremely high levels of sedatives in her blood, along with clear signs of malnutrition and severe dehydration. If you had brought her in a few hours later, we might not have been able to reverse it." Megan felt tears welling up but held them back. "Is she going to recover?" "With the proper treatment, yes. But it will take time, and she'll need surgery. There's an intestinal blockage that needs to be corrected urgently. Without the surgery, the prognosis is very poor." "Then do the surgery." The doctor hesitated. "It's not that simple. We need authorization from a legal guardian. We've tried to contact her son, but we can't get through, and her daughter-in-law, who presents herself as the guardian, is refusing to authorize any procedure. Megan felt her blood boil. She can't do that. Mrs. Brandon will get worse. I know, but legally my hands are tied. Unless we can contact the son, or there's a court intervention, I can't operate. Megan left the hospital with renewed determination. It wasn't enough just to have proof. She needed to reach Robert Brandon, Helen's son, and make him aware of everything. But how could she find him? Beatrice controlled all forms of communication. The number Helen had given didn't work, and time was running out. It was Liam who had the idea. Meg, remember the housemaid? Clara? She worked there for years. Maybe she knows something we don't. Megan picked up the phone and called Clara's number. The young woman answered on the third ring, her voice frightened. Hello? Clara, it's Megan. I need your help. I need to find Robert Brandon, Mrs. Brandon's son. Do you have any information? Anything at all? There was a silence on the other end. Then Clara spoke softly. There's one thing. I once saw the cook, Irene, talking with Mrs. Brandon. They were close. Irene has worked there for over 20 years. If anyone knows how to contact Robert, it's her. Do you have her contact information? I do, but she's scared. Scared of losing her job, scared of her boss. I don't know if she'll be willing to help. Try for me, Clara, please. Mrs. Brandon's life depends on it. A few hours later, Megan's phone rang. It was an unknown number. Hello? The voice on the other end was mature, tired. My name is Irene. Clara told me what's happening. I've worked at the Brandon house for many years. I've seen a lot. Things no one should see. Irene, I need to speak with Robert. His mother is in the hospital. She needs urgent surgery, and Beatrice is blocking everything. I know. That woman is the devil in human form. When she entered that house, everything changed. Robert is a good man, but he's blind. She manipulates him in a way that's just pitiful. Do you know how I can talk to him? Irene hesitated. I do. But it's dangerous. If she finds out I helped, I'll lose everything. I have a daughter in college, bills to pay. I understand, Irene. But you're the only hope Mrs. Brandon has. There was another silence. Then Irene spoke. There's a box in Mrs. Brandon's room, an old wooden box hidden behind a false wall near the wardrobe. Inside that box is a small safe. The combination is Robert's birthday, 031173. Inside the safe are important documents and a piece of paper with his personal number, the real one which he only uses for emergencies. Mrs. Brandon hid it there before she was confined to her room. How am I going to get into the house? They threw me out. I can help. Tomorrow afternoon the boss is going to a charity event. She always goes. It's the only time the house is emptier. I'll leave the kitchen door unlocked, but you have to be quick. The security guards still make their rounds. Megan thanked her, her voice choked with emotion. The next day, at precisely 3 in the afternoon, she and Liam were back in Kenwood. Megan's heart was beating so hard it felt like it would leap out of her chest. They entered through the kitchen door, as Irene had promised. The cook was there, preparing something on the stove. But she made a silent gesture indicating the stairs. Quick, she'll be back. In 2 hours. Megan ran upstairs, Liam right behind her. They entered Helen's room, now empty and even sadder without the elderly woman's presence. Megan went straight to the wardrobe, searching for the false wall. It took a few minutes to find it. It was a wooden panel that moved when pressed in the right corner. Behind it, embedded in the wall, was a small, carved wooden box. Megan pulled it out carefully and opened it. Inside, a digital safe. She entered the combination Irene had given her. The safe beeped and opened. Inside was a treasure trove of truths. Old letters, original family documents, copies of wills, yellowed photographs, and most importantly, a white envelope with Helen's trembling handwriting. For my son Robert, in case something happens to me. Megan opened the envelope. Inside were 2 handwritten pages where Helen described everything: the abuse, the manipulation, the threats, the changes in her medication, and at the end, a phone number with the country code for France. She took out her cell phone, her hands shaking, and dialed the number. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a tired male voice answered in English with a slight French accent. Hello? Megan took a deep breath. Mr. Robert Brandon. Yes, who is this? My name is Megan Oliver. I was your mother's caregiver. Sir, you need to know something very serious. Your mother is in the hospital, in critical condition, and your wife is preventing her from receiving the necessary treatment. There was a silence on the other end. What? What do you mean? I spoke with my mother yesterday. She said she was fine, just tired. It wasn't your mother who answered, Mr. Brandon. It was your wife. She's been using Mrs. Brandon's cell phone, pretending to be her, keeping you deceived about her real condition. This is absurd. Who do you think you are to make such an accusation? Megan felt the urgency tighten in her chest. Sir, I have proof. Audio files, documents, your mother's diary, everything. Your wife is drugging Helen, keeping her prisoner, planning to have her declared incompetent to gain control of the family's assets. You need to come back to the States. Now. Robert's voice faltered. Proof? What kind of proof? Megan began to describe everything quickly. The audio files from the flash drive, the conversations between Beatrice and the doctor, the forged documents, the hidden box, the deplorable state Helen was in when she was taken to the hospital. She spoke without stopping, desperately, knowing this was her only chance. Robert was silent for several long seconds. Megan could hear his heavy breathing, the shock being processed. Finally he spoke, his voice broken. Is my mother really in the hospital? Yes, sir. St. Luke's Medical Center, and she needs urgent surgery. But your wife, as the legal guardian, is refusing to authorize it. Mrs. Brandon will get worse if nothing is done. My God, I trusted her completely. How could? I have been so blind. You couldn't have known. She's very smart, very calculating. Robert took a deep breath. I'm coming back. I'll take the first flight. But I need that proof, all of it. Can you send it to me? Yes. I'll email everything to you right now. And Megan, one more thing. I can't come back as Robert. If she knows I'm in the country, she'll destroy everything, get rid of evidence, threaten witnesses. I need to arrive unnoticed. I need to see with my own eyes what's happening in my own home. Megan understood immediately. Do you have any idea how to do that? I do. The company has a contract with an electrical maintenance provider. They come in and out of the house frequently. Beatrice doesn't even look at those workers. She treats them as if they're invisible. I'll pose as one of them. Megan felt a glimmer of hope. That could work. I'll arrange everything from here. It should take a couple of days for me to get there. In the meantime, I need you to keep an eye on the hospital. Don't let them do anything to my mother. I'll arrange for a court order to temporarily assume legal responsibility for her. I have lawyers who can do that quickly. You can count on me. I'll stay with her. And Megan, thank you. Thank you for not giving up on my mother when it would have been so much easier to just walk away. Megan hung up the phone with tears in her eyes. Beside her, Liam was smiling. We did it, Meg. We did it. They left the mansion the same way they entered, quickly and discreetly. Irene was waiting for them in the kitchen. Did you manage? Yes, he's coming back, and he's going to get justice. Irene closed her eyes and murmured a silent prayer. Thank God, that woman needs to pay for what she's done. The next 2 days were a roller coaster of emotions. Megan practically lived at the hospital, sleeping in uncomfortable chairs, eating whatever she could buy from vending machines, but always keeping an eye on Helen. The elderly woman remained sedated, but the doctors said she was responding well to the initial treatment. The surgery, however, could not wait any longer. Beatrice appeared at the hospital twice. The first time she tried to convince the doctors to transfer Helen to a private clinic where she would have more control. The doctors, alerted by Megan and the inconsistencies in the case, refused. The second time, Beatrice tried to confront Megan directly. You're still meddling where you don't belong. This is going to end very badly for you. Megan faced her without fear. The only thing that's going to end badly is for the person who hurt a defenseless elderly woman. Beatrice smiled, a cold smile. You have no idea who you're messing with. Oh, I do. And soon a lot of people will know too. Beatrice left in her fury, her heels echoing down the hallway. Megan knew she had provoked the beast, but she didn't care. Robert was on his way, and with him, the truth would come. On the morning of the third day, Megan received a text from an unknown number. I've arrived. I'm heading to the house now, keep in touch. It was Robert. Megan pictured the scene. A rich, powerful man, dressed in an electrician's uniform, helmet, a fake beard, walking through his own house without being recognized by his wife. There was something theatrical about it, but also a poetic justice. Robert entered the mansion as Louis, an electrician from PowerPro Services, a company that did indeed provide services to the residents. Beatrice was in the living room on the phone, arguing with someone about legal proceedings. She barely glanced at him when he entered. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm here to check the electrical system on the second floor. There have been reports of instability." Beatrice made a dismissive gesture with her hand, not even looking up from her phone. "Do what you have to do and get out of here." Robert went upstairs, his heart hammering in his chest. Every room in that house was familiar, yet everything seemed different. There was a coldness, a sense of oppression he had never noticed before. He reached his mother's room and felt a tightness in his chest. The room was empty now, but the signs were all there. The bed without clean sheets, the smell of mold, the heavy curtains blocking the light, the box of medicine on the nightstand. He picked up the box and photographed the labels. Then he opened the drawers and found prescriptions. He photographed everything. He went back downstairs and, with his phone hidden in his hand, started recording. He moved through the house pretending to check outlets and circuit breakers, but in reality he was capturing conversations. Beatrice was on the phone again, this time with someone who seemed to be Dr. Maurice Evans. "Yes, I know she's in the hospital, but I'm not authorizing any surgery. The longer she remains debilitated, the better for us. Yes, the incompetency proceedings are almost ready. Just need the judge's signature. Once that's done, everything will be in my name. You'll get your share, don't worry." Robert felt bile rise in his throat. It was true. Everything Megan had said was true. He continued recording. Beatrice made 2 more calls. In the first, she argued with someone about paying off a former employee to keep quiet. In the second, she vaguely threatened someone who seemed to be a witness. Robert left the house 2 hours later, his phone full of recordings, photos, and evidence. He went straight to his lawyer's office in downtown Chicago. He put everything on the table and said, "I want this woman away from my mother. I want her prosecuted. I want justice." The lawyers worked quickly. Within 48 hours, they had a court injunction removing Beatrice as Helen's legal guardian and transferring all powers to Robert. They also had a formal complaint against her and Dr. Maurice Evans for elder abuse, false imprisonment, document forgery, and embezzlement. Robert went to the hospital personally to authorize the surgery. Megan was there by Helen's bedside when he walked in. She recognized him immediately, even without the disguise. He was tall, with the same kind eyes as his mother, but now they were red and swollen. "Megan, I finally meet you in person. I don't even know how to thank you." "You don't have to thank me. I did what anyone should do. But you risked everything. Your safety, your job, everything for someone you didn't even know." Megan looked at Helen, still asleep. "Oh, I knew her. I knew her suffering, and I couldn't ignore it." Robert held his mother's hand and cried. He sat by the bed and stayed there in silence for several long minutes. Then he turned to Megan. "The surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning. The doctors are confident. She's going to recover." "Thank God." "And as for Beatrice, I'm calling her for a meeting at the office in the house. I want to confront her personally. I want her to know that I know everything, and I want her to pay for every second of suffering she caused my mother." Megan nodded. It was time for the truth to come out. It was time for justice to be served. The next day, Helen was taken into surgery. Megan and Robert waited together in the waiting room, drinking bad coffee from a machine, talking about life, about choices, about regrets. Robert told her how he met Beatrice at a business event, how he was seduced by her elegance and intelligence, how he never suspected her true intentions. "She was so convincing, so perfect, and I was lonely, tired of working so much. My mother tried to warn me in the beginning, you know, but I wouldn't listen. I thought it was just a mother's jealousy, fear of losing her son. How wrong I was. You couldn't have known people like that are experts at deception. But I should have paid more attention. I should have visited more, called more, been suspicious when my mother started to seem perpetually tired on our video calls. Megan placed a hand on his shoulder. The important thing is that you're here now and you're going to do the right thing. The surgery lasted 4 hours. When the doctor finally came out, he was smiling. Everything went well. We managed to correct the obstruction. She'll need intensive care for a few days, but the prognosis is excellent. Robert hugged Megan, relieved. Liam, who had arrived a short while ago, also celebrated. Now it was time to settle the score with Beatrice. Robert scheduled the meeting for the next day, at 10 in the morning in the mansion's office. He only said he needed to discuss urgent financial matters. Beatrice arrived promptly, elegant as always, but with a slightly tense expression. She knew something was wrong, but she couldn't imagine the extent of the disaster about to befall her. Robert was sitting behind the desk, serious. Beside him, 2 lawyers and a court officer. On the desk, piles of documents, an open laptop, and a recorder. Beatrice entered and stopped, her eyes scanning the room. "What is this, Robert? I thought you were still in Europe. I came back 3 days ago, and I've discovered a lot of interesting things." His tone was sharp, controlled. Beatrice sat down slowly, trying to maintain her composure. "What are you talking about?" Robert opened the laptop and turned the screen toward her. He began to play the audio files from the flash drive, the conversations with the doctor, the discussions about dosages, the threats to employees. Beatrice turned pale. "Where did you get this?" "From someone who cares about my mother more than her own daughter-in-law, someone who had the courage to risk everything to do the right thing." He then showed her the photos of the forged documents, the recordings he himself had made in the house, the altered prescriptions. He piled them all in front of her, one by one, like cards in a poker game where he held the winning hand. Beatrice tried to defend herself, tried to claim it was all a misunderstanding, that she was just taking care of her mother-in-law, that the employees were lying. But Robert gave her no room. "You kept my mother imprisoned, drugged, isolated. You answered my messages pretending to be her. You planned to have her declared incompetent to steal what is hers, and you almost killed her." Beatrice stood up, furious. "You can't prove any of this." "Oh, I can, and I already have. There's a court injunction removing you from any decisions regarding my mother. There's a criminal case being filed against you for elder abuse, false imprisonment, and fraud. And there's also a divorce proceeding being filed today." Beatrice's face contorted, a mixture of anger, fear, and desperation. "You wouldn't do this." "I already have." The lawyers handed her the documents. Court notices, restraining orders, divorce papers. All official, stamped, signed. Beatrice tried to argue, tried to threaten, but she realized she was cornered. She stood up, took the documents, and left the room without another word, her heels echoing down the hallway like gunshots. Robert remained there, sitting, breathing deeply. He was trembling, not with fear, but with contained rage. It took him a few minutes to compose himself. One of the lawyers placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did the right thing." "I hope so. I hope my mother can recover from all of this." "She will. And she'll have you by her side this time." That afternoon, Robert went to the hospital. Helen was already awake, still weak, but conscious. When she saw her son enter the room, her eyes filled with tears. "My son, you came back." Robert knelt by the bed, held her hand, and cried, "Forgive me, Mom. Forgive me for not noticing, for not being here, for letting them do this to you." Helen caressed his face. "You didn't know, my son. She was very clever. But you're here now, and everything is all right." Megan watched from the doorway, discreet, emotional. Liam was beside her, his eyes also moist. Robert turned to her. "Megan, come here." She approached shyly. "My mother told me everything. How you cared for her, how you risked everything, how you didn't give up even. When you were thrown out and threatened, I have no words to thank you. I only did what was right." Helen held Megan's hand. "You saved me, my dear. You gave me a second chance at life. And for that," Robert continued, "I want to make you an offer. I want you to be my mother's official companion, with a proper salary, housing, everything. You and your brother can move into the mansion. You deserve a better life." Megan looked at Liam, who was smiling. She looked at Helen, who was nodding. She looked at Robert, who was watching her, with sincere gratitude. "I accept." And so in that hospital room, amidst tears and smiles, a new story began. A story of new beginnings, of justice, of good people who don't give up, even when all seems lost. A story of love, not yet romantic, but a love for humanity, for compassion, for the courage to do what is right, even when it's hard. And Megan, the domestic worker who had lived her life sacrificing for others, finally found a place where she was valued, respected, and loved. A place where she could at last also take care of herself. The months that followed were a time of profound transformation. The mansion in Kenwood, which once breathed oppression and coldness, began to come to life again. The heavy curtains were replaced with light fabrics that let the sunlight flood the rooms. The windows were kept open, bringing in fresh air and the songs of birds from the garden. Helen, who had spent so much time locked in that dark room, now walked through the hallways with slow but steady steps, leaning sometimes on Megan, sometimes on Robert. Megan and Liam moved into the mansion on an August afternoon. They brought few things, only the essentials accumulated over years of modest living. Megan was given a spacious room on the second floor near Helen's, with a comfortable bed, an old solid wood wardrobe, and a window overlooking the garden. Liam stayed in another room on the same floor, smaller but cozy, with a desk where he could study. He had enrolled in a technical course in mechanics, encouraged by Robert, who wanted to help the young man build a better future. The routine in the house changed completely. Irene, the cook who had risked so much to help, was promoted to head housekeeper, with a salary increase and full autonomy to hire and manage the domestic staff. She chose trustworthy people, professionals who treated their work with dignity and who respected their employers, but were also respected by them. Helen recovered day by day. The surgery had been a success, and with proper care, a balanced diet, and most importantly, without the excessive medication that had kept her sedated, she returned to being the strong, lucid woman she had always been. Megan accompanied every step of this recovery, helping with the physical exercises recommended by the physical therapists, talking for hours about life, dreams, the past, and the future. The two developed a deep bond. Helen saw in Megan the daughter she never had, and Megan saw in Helen the mother figure she had lost so early. They spent their afternoons in the garden, sitting under the shade of a century-old oak tree, drinking tea and sharing stories. Helen told her about her youth, about how she met her husband, who had passed away 10 years ago, about how they built their fortune with honest work and dedication. Megan, in turn, spoke about her simple childhood, about the parents who left too soon, about the sacrifices she made for Liam. "Your heart is very big, Megan, too big for this world that is sometimes so cruel." Megan smiled, stirring sugar into her tea. "I've learned that you have to do good, Helen, even if it's just for one person. It makes a difference." "It made all the difference in my life, my dear. You gave me hope when I had none left." Robert watched these conversations from a distance, often from his office window. There was something about Megan that touched him deeply. It wasn't just gratitude for saving his mother, although that was immense. It was the way she genuinely cared about people, how she treated Helen with affection and patience, how she encouraged Liam to study and dream, how she talked with Irene and the other staff as if they were friends. Megan had a light of her own, a kindness that was neither feigned nor self-serving. It was real, pure, rare. He began to look for excuses to be near her. He would ask about Helen's health, about how the day had been, if they needed anything. At first, Megan responded formally, maintaining a respectful distance between employer and employee. But over time, the conversations became more natural, longer, more intimate. One September evening, Robert came home late, tired from endless meetings. He found Megan in the kitchen, making chamomile tea. She had put Helen to bed and couldn't fall asleep herself. "Still awake? It's past midnight." Megan was startled, turning around quickly. "Oh, Mr. Brandon, I didn't expect you so late. Would you like some tea? I just made it." "I'd love some. And please, just call me Robert. This Mr. Brandon business makes me feel old." She smiled, getting another cup. All right, Robert. They sat at the kitchen table, under the soft light of the pendant lamp. The house was quiet, just the ticking of the clock on the wall and the distant sound of cars on the avenue. How was your day? Is my mother doing well? She's doing great. Today she walked to the garden gate without any help. It was emotional to see the joy on her face. Robert smiled, stirring his tea. She's changed so much. She's back to her old self. Thanks to you. Thanks to God and the doctors too. No, Megan. Thanks to you. You didn't have to do anything. You could have just taken the money, done your job and left. But you chose to care. You chose to risk everything. Megan lowered her eyes. I couldn't have lived with myself if I had ignored her suffering. And that's why you're special. You have something that many people have lost. True empathy. There was a comfortable silence. Robert watched her, noticing for the first time the details of her face. Her honest brown eyes, her hands calloused from work, her serene expression. There was a beauty there, not the artificial, calculated beauty of Beatrice, but something genuine, natural. Megan, can I ask you a personal question? She looked up. Of course. Did you ever think about doing something else? Studying, pursuing a different career? Megan sighed. I thought about it. I always did. But after my parents were gone, I had to take on responsibilities. Liam was very young and someone had to work. I dropped out of high school, started cleaning houses, and that was that. I don't regret it, because I took care of my brother. But sometimes I wonder what could have been. It's not too late, you know. You're still young, you can go. Back to school, do whatever you want. Maybe one day. For now I'm happy here, taking care of Helen, watching my brother grow. It's more than I ever expected from life. Robert felt a wave of emotion. There was so much dignity in this woman, so much quiet strength. He had met so many people throughout his life, rich, powerful, influential people, but few had the wealth of character that Megan possessed. The weeks passed, and the closeness between them grew. Robert started having lunch at home more often, sitting at the table with Helen, Megan, and Liam. The meals were cheerful, with conversations about everything from politics to football. Liam and Robert developed an unexpected friendship, with the businessman offering advice on careers and life, and the young man bringing a fresh, honest perspective on the world. Helen watched everything with a smile on her face. She saw what was happening between her son and Megan, saw the way he looked at her, how he sought her company, how he smiled when she entered the room. And she also saw how Megan, though she tried to maintain her composure, was beginning to return those feelings. Their gazes lingered a little longer. Their smiles were more frequent. Their conversations stretched late into the night. One October afternoon, Helen called Megan for a private chat in her room. Sit here, dear. I want to talk to you about something. Megan sat in the armchair by the bed, curious. Yes, Helen? Have you noticed that my son is interested in you? Megan felt her face flush. Helen, I don't know what you're talking about. You don't have to pretend with me, dear. I have eyes, and I have experience. I see the way he looks at you, and I also see the way you... So look at him. Megan lowered her head. I know it wouldn't be appropriate. He's my employer. I work here. It would be strange, complicated. Nonsense. My son is a free man. You are a free woman, and you are two wonderful people who respect and admire each other. Why would it be wrong? Because I come from a completely different world. I'm a domestic worker. He's a wealthy businessman. People will talk. They'll judge. Helen took Megan's hand. My dear, I've learned in life that true love is rare, very rare, and when it appears you have to grab it, with both hands no matter what others say. Robert was married to a woman who had everything on paper, beauty, education, social class. And look how that turned out. She was rotten on the inside. You, on the other hand, have something no money can buy, a good heart, and that's what matters. Megan felt her eyes well up. But what if it doesn't work out? What if I'm not enough for him? You are more than enough, and he knows it. He's just afraid of scaring you, of you thinking he's taking advantage of his position. But I know, my son, he truly admires you. He truly respects you. Give yourselves a chance, Megan. Give happiness a chance. That night, Megan couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned, thinking about Helen's words, about Robert, about the possibility of something that seemed so improbable. She had grown accustomed to living for others, to sacrificing her own desires. The idea of being happy, of being loved, seemed almost selfish. But at the same time, for the first time in many years, she allowed herself to dream. She allowed herself to imagine a different future, a future where she wasn't just the caregiver, the sister, the employee, but simply Megan, a woman with dreams, with desires, with a right to happiness. Robert, for his part, was also tormented by conflicting feelings. He knew he was falling in love with Megan, but he didn't know how to approach the subject. He was afraid of offending her, of her thinking he was being inappropriate, of ruining the trusting relationship they had built. It was Helen who took the initiative to bring them together. One November evening, she pretended to feel unwell and asked Robert and Megan to stay with her. They spent hours talking, three of them together, about life, the past, future plans. And when Helen finally said she was feeling better and was going to sleep, she made sure to leave them alone on the room's balcony under the starry Chicago sky. Robert and Megan stood there in silence, watching the illuminated city in the distance, until Robert finally found his courage. "Megan, can I tell you something?" She turned to him. "Of course. I know this might sound strange, and if you want to tell me to shut up, I'll understand. But I have to be honest, these last few months have been the best of my life. And it's not just because my mother is recovering. It's because you're here. You brought light into this house. You brought joy, warmth, life. And I can't imagine my days without you in them anymore." Megan felt her heart race. "Robert, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything right now. I just wanted you to know. I wanted you to know that I admire you immensely, that I respect you, and that I'm starting to feel something very strong for you, something I haven't felt in a very long time. Maybe I've never truly felt it." Megan felt tears stream down her face. She had spent so long guarding her own feelings, trying to maintain a professional distance, that hearing this was both liberating and terrifying. "I feel something too, Robert. I'm afraid to admit it, afraid it's wrong, but I do. When you come home, my day gets better. When we talk, I feel seen, heard, valued. But I'm so scared. Scared of not being enough. Scared that the differences between us are too great." Robert stepped closer and took her hands. "The only differences between us are the ones other people have created. I don't see a domestic worker when I look at you. I see an incredible, strong, brave, kind woman. I see someone who makes me want to be a better person, and that's all that matters to me." Megan looked into his eyes and saw pure sincerity. She saw a man who had been deceived, hurt, but who still believed in true love. She saw someone who saw her for who she really was, not for what she did. And then, under the stars of Chicago, they kissed for the first time. Soft, tentative kiss, filled with emotion and promise. A kiss that sealed not just a romance, but a partnership based on respect, admiration, and genuine love. From the room, hidden behind the curtain, Helen watched with tears of joy in her eyes. Her son had finally found someone who loved him for who he was, not for what he had. And Megan, the young woman who saved her life, was finally allowing herself to be happy. The following months were a time of discreet but happy courtship. Robert and Megan didn't hide their relationship, but they didn't broadcast it either. Liam was initially surprised, but then fully supportive. He saw how different his sister was, lighter, more cheerful, more alive. Irene and the other staff also celebrated, happy to see two good people finding happiness together. Robert showed Megan a Chicago she had never experienced. Dinners at elegant restaurants, walks through Millennium Park at dusk, visits to museums and theaters. But their favorite moments were the simplest ones. Watching a movie at home, walking through the garden hand in hand, talking late into the night about dreams and plans. Robert encouraged Megan to go back to school. He paid for a prep course so she could finish her high school diploma, and then enrolled her in a university for a degree in social work. Megan had discovered a calling to help vulnerable people, and wanted to turn that calling into a profession. As for the case against Beatrice, things moved quickly. With all the evidence presented, she was convicted of elder abuse, document forgery, and embezzlement. Dr. Maurice Evans was also punished, losing his medical license and facing criminal charges. Beatrice tried to negotiate, tried to threaten, but to no avail. She lost everything, the status, the money, and was sentenced to probation and community service. Robert never spoke to her again. The divorce was finalized without them seeing each other in person. He didn't feel anger, only pity. Pity for someone who had so much but was so empty inside that she needed to destroy others to feel powerful. One December afternoon, almost a year after Megan first entered that mansion, Robert took her back to the garden by the oak tree where so many important conversations had taken place. Helen was there, sitting in her favorite chair, smiling. "Megan, this year has been the most incredible of my life. You've taught me what courage is, what kindness is, what true love is, and I don't want another single day without you by my side." He knelt, taking a small velvet box from his pocket. "Marry me, Megan. Not because you saved my mother, not because I'm grateful, but because you are the person I want to build a life with, because I love you in a way I never knew was possible." Megan looked at the box, at Robert, at Helen, who was crying with emotion, and felt her heart overflow with happiness. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll." Liam appeared from behind a tree, smiling and clapping. Irene and the other staff were also there, hidden, all celebrating. There was champagne, there was music, there was joy. The wedding was set for the following March, an intimate ceremony in the mansion's gardens under the oak tree. Only close family and true friends. Megan wore a simple but elegant dress chosen by Helen. Liam was the best man. Irene personally oversaw the banquet, and when the officiant declared them husband and wife, there wasn't a dry eye among the guests. But the story of Megan and Robert didn't stop there. Inspired by everything they had been through, they decided to use their experience and resources to help others. They created a non-profit foundation dedicated to protecting elderly victims of neglect and abuse. The organization offered free legal assistance, psychological support, medical care, and most importantly, a safe space where these individuals could be heard and protected. Megan became the foundation's executive director, applying everything she learned in college and everything she had lived through in practice. She personally visited each case, talked to each elderly person, ensuring that no one was left behind. Robert handled the administrative and financial side, using his contacts in the business world to secure donations and partnerships. Liam, who had graduated as a mechanic, created a social workshop within the foundation, teaching at-risk youth a trade, giving them the same chance Robert had given him. Helen, even at her advanced age, also got involved in the project. She gave talks at schools and events about the importance of caring for the elderly, how to identify signs of abuse, and how to report it. Her story moved crowds and inspired change. The mansion in Kenwood transformed into a true home, a place where love was cultivated, where differences were celebrated, where each person was valued for who they were, not what they had. The walls that had once witnessed suffering now echoed with laughter, conversation, and music. And Megan, the domestic worker who had once arrived there just looking for a salary to pay bills, now walked the same hallways as the lady of the house, a beloved wife, the director of a life-changing organization. But despite all the transformations, she never forgot where she came from. She never lost her humility, her empathy, her desire to make a difference, because Megan knew that true wealth wasn't in expensive furniture, crystal chandeliers, or bank accounts. It was in human connections, in the ability to care for one's neighbor, in the courage to do what is right, even when it's hard. And that wealth she had carried within her heart all along, long before she met Robert, long before she entered that mansion. It was the wealth of a good heart, and that no one could ever take from her. 3 years had passed since that emotional wedding in the mansion's gardens. Megan's life had changed in ways she could never have imagined on that grey June morning when she first entered that house as a temporary employee. Now, at 35, she was Megan Oliver Brandon, Robert's wife, executive director of one of Chicago's most respected elder protection foundations. a university student about to graduate with a degree in social work. But above all, she was a woman who had finally found her place in the world. The foundation they created had grown impressively. What started as a pilot project with a small team now had 3 branches in different parts of Chicago, more than 50 employees including social workers, lawyers, psychologists, and caregivers, and had handled over 1,000 cases in recent years. Each story was different, but they all shared the same core of suffering that Helen had experienced: isolation, manipulation, neglect, abuse disguised as care. Megan dedicated herself to the work with an unshakable passion. She personally knew every elderly person served by the foundation, visited the branches regularly, participated in case meetings, and followed the legal proceedings. There was something about her that inspired immediate trust. Perhaps it was her calm, welcoming voice, perhaps it was her honest gaze, or perhaps it was simply the fact that she genuinely cared. People felt. One of the stories that marked Megan the most was that of Mr. Joseph, an 82-year-old man who had been reported by a concerned neighbor. He lived alone in a simple house on the north side, and the grandson who was supposed to care for him rarely appeared, though he never hesitated to collect the retirement check every month. When Megan first arrived at the house, she found Mr. Joseph thin, the house dirty, the refrigerator empty, sitting in an old chair watching a silent tube television. "Good morning, Mr. Joseph. My name is Megan. I came here to talk with you and see if I can help in any way." The old man looked at her suspiciously. "I don't need any help. Everything's fine here." But Megan knew how to recognize the signs. She sat beside him unhurriedly and started to talk. She spoke about life, about Chicago, about baseball. Gradually, Mr. Joseph began to open up. He told her about his wife who had passed away 5 years ago, about his son who lived far away, about the grandson who promised to return, but never did. "You feel lonely, don't you?" The old man's eyes filled with tears. "Very, very lonely." Megan held his hand. "You don't have to be alone anymore. We're going to take care of you." And they did. The foundation provided a caregiver who visited Mr. Joseph 3 times a week, ensured he received proper nutrition, arranged medical appointments, and most importantly, filed a lawsuit against the grandson for embezzlement and neglect. Mr. Joseph began attending a senior social group run by the foundation, where he made friends, played dominoes, and told stories. Months later, when Megan visited him again, she found a completely different man. He had gained weight. His face was rosy, his eyes sparkled. "Mrs. Brandon, you saved me. I didn't want to live anymore, you know, but now I have reasons. I have my friends from the group. I have Celia who comes to keep me company. I have you and your husband who care about me." Megan hugged the old man, moved. "You deserve to be happy, Mr. Joseph. Everyone does." Cases like Mr. Joseph's multiplied. Every week new reports came in, some by phone, others by email, many through referrals from hospitals and social workers. Each case was treated with seriousness, dedication, and humanity. The foundation was non-profit. Every resource raised was reinvested to expand services, hire more professionals, and improve infrastructure. Robert was equally involved. He had reduced his workload at the family company to dedicate more time to the project. He participated in strategic meetings, sought partnerships with other organizations, and spoke with politicians about the need for stricter laws to protect vulnerable seniors. But his favorite moments were when he accompanied Megan on her visits. Seeing the way she interacted with people, how she managed to gain their trust, how she transformed suffering into hope, made him fall in love with her even more. Helen, now 74, was more active than ever. Her full recovery had taken time, but she had returned to being the vibrant woman she had always been. She participated in the foundation's activities as a volunteer, giving talks, visiting seniors, and offering her personal testimony as proof that it was possible to overcome even the most difficult situations. She had become a symbol of resilience and hope. Liam, now 26, had become a responsible and dedicated man. The social workshop he coordinated had already trained over 100 young people in auto mechanics, many of whom found jobs at good companies. He had also started dating Clara, the former housemaid from the mansion who had helped Megan in those terrible days. Together, they were building a simple but happy life. But it wasn't all roses. The work at the foundation was emotionally draining. Megan often came home exhausted, carrying the weight of the stories she heard, the situations she witnessed. There were cases that ended well, but there were others that came too late, where the damage was already done, where justice took so long that the suffering was indefinitely prolonged. One particularly difficult night, after losing an important court case where an elderly man would remain in the custody of an abusive daughter-in-law due to legal loopholes, Megan came home and broke down. Robert found her sitting on the bedroom floor, crying, her head in her hands. "Honey, what happened?" She looked up at him with red eyes. "I failed, Robert. That man, Mr. Anthony, he's going to keep suffering and I couldn't stop it." Robert sat beside her and held her. "You didn't fail. You did everything in your power. The system failed. But it's not enough. He needs help now, not months from now when we can. Appeal. Megan, you've already helped hundreds of people. Hundreds. You can't save everyone by yourself. It's impossible. But every person you save, every life you transform, is a victory. It's proof that it's worth continuing." Megan rested her head on his shoulder. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing enough, if I shouldn't be doing more." "You are doing more than most people will ever do, and you're doing it with love, with dedication. That's already so much." They stayed there, embraced on the bedroom floor in silence until Megan calmed down. Robert knew these crises would come from time to time, that the weight of the work was heavy, but he also knew that Megan would not give up. She wasn't the type to quit. Over time, the foundation began to gain public recognition. Articles in newspapers, reports on television programs, awards from social organizations. Megan was frequently invited to give lectures at universities, corporate events, and human rights conferences. She accepted some invitations, especially those at schools and colleges, because she believed it was important to inspire the next generation of professionals. At one of these lectures, at a law school on the west side of Chicago, Megan told her own story. She talked about how she started as a domestic worker, how she found Helen suffering in silence, how she decided to risk everything to do what was right. She spoke of the difficulties, the fears, the moments she wanted to give up. But she also spoke of the victories, the transformed lives, the joy of seeing an elderly person smile again. At the end of the lecture, a young student raised her hand. "How do you find the strength to continue when the cases are so difficult?" Megan thought for a moment before answering. "I find strength by remembering why I started. I remember Helen's face in that dark room, her eyes pleading for help. I remember every person we've managed to help, every smile we've managed to bring back. And I remember that if I give up, who will take care of these people? Someone needs to be there, and if not me, then who?" The entire room applauded. Many students approached her afterward, interested in interning at the foundation, in contributing in some way. Megan left feeling renewed, reminded that her work had an impact not only on the seniors she helped directly, but also on society as a whole, inspiring others to care, to act. At home, the dynamic had settled into an affectionate and balanced routine. Megan and Robert had dinner together whenever possible, talking about their day, sharing worries and joys. Helen often joined them, bringing stories from the volunteer group or comments on some soap opera she was watching. Liam would show up on weekends with Clara, and the house would fill with laughter and lively conversation. It was during one of these weekend gatherings on a sunny Sunday in September that Megan made an announcement that would change everything again. "Everyone, I have some news to share." They all looked at her, curious. Robert held her hand, sensing something important. "I'm pregnant." The silence lasted only a second before the house erupted in celebration. Helen started to cry with joy, hugging Megan tightly. Liam pumped his fist victoriously. Clara offered emotional congratulations. And Robert was speechless for several long seconds, just looking at his wife with an expression of pure ecstasy. "Honey, is it true? We're having a baby?" Megan smiled, tears in her eyes. "We are. We're having a son." Robert hugged her, lifting her off the ground and spinning her around. "I love you so much. So much. You have no idea how happy I am right now." The following months were a flurry of preparation. The baby's room was set up with care, with Megan choosing every detail. Helen insisted on gifting them the crib that had been Robert's as a baby, a beautiful antique of varnished wood. Liam and Clara offered to be godparents. Irene was already planning the baby shower. Megan continued working at the foundation for most of her pregnancy, only slowing down in the last 2 months. She didn't want to step away completely, but Robert and Helen insisted she needed to rest, to take care of herself and the baby. In early April, on a calm morning, Megan went into labor. Robert rushed her to the hospital, nervous, anxious, but also immensely happy. Helen, Liam and Clara followed shortly after. The labor lasted 6 hours, long, intense, but in the end, when Megan heard the baby's first cry, it was all worth it. It was a boy, healthy, with rosy cheeks and clenched fists. "He's perfect," Megan whispered, holding the baby in her arms, looking at that tiny, wonderful face. Robert was beside her, also crying. "He looks like you." "Poor thing then," Megan joked, exhausted but radiant. They decided to name the boy Gabriel, which means messenger of God, because that baby was truly a message of hope, a symbol of everything Megan and Robert had built together, a reminder that something beautiful can be born from suffering. Helen was one of the first to hold her grandson. She looked at the baby with infinite tenderness, thinking about everything that had happened in recent years. If someone had told her, in that dark room where she was trapped and drugged, that in a few years she would be holding her grandson in her arms, surrounded by people she loved, in a life full of purpose and joy, she wouldn't have believed it. But there she was, living that wonderful reality. "Thank you," she whispered to Megan. "Thank you for saving me, for saving my son, for bringing so much light into our lives." Megan held her hand. "We saved each other, Helen. We saved each other." The following months were about adapting to the new routine with Gabriel. Megan took a 6-month leave from the foundation, dedicating herself fully to the baby. But she was already planning her return, already thinking about the projects she wanted to implement, the improvements she wanted to make. Being a mother was wonderful, but she knew she also needed to continue the work that had become her life's mission. Robert was a present and dedicated father. He woke up in the middle of the night to help with feedings, changed diapers without complaint, and sang lullabies in a voice that wasn't exactly in tune, but soothed Gabriel immediately. Seeing her husband with their son in his arms with that expression of pure love made Megan's heart overflow. The foundation continued to run smoothly, even without Megan's daily presence. The team they had built was competent and committed, but everyone missed her, the energy she brought, the passion she inspired. When Gabriel turned 6 months old, Megan returned to work part-time, 3 days a week, a few hours a day. Enough to continue making a difference, but without being too far from her son. Robert rearranged his schedule so he could be with Gabriel on the days Megan worked. Helen also helped, loving every second with her grandson. One October afternoon, exactly 4 years after, Megan first entered the Brandon mansion. The foundation organized a special event. It was a celebration of all they had accomplished, but also a moment of reflection on the challenges that still remained. The event took place in the mansion's gardens, under the oak tree where so many important moments had occurred. There were over 200 people present, seniors who had been helped by the foundation, employees, volunteers, partners, public officials and journalists. Megan was invited to give a speech. She walked up to the small stage set up for the occasion, with Gabriel in her arms and Robert by her side. She looked out at the audience and felt a deep emotion. "When I arrived at this house 4 years ago, I was just a domestic worker looking for a better salary. I had no idea that my life was about to change completely. I didn't know I would find a cause worth fighting for. I never imagined I would meet incredible people who would become my family. And I definitely never dreamed that today I would be here, with my husband and my son, celebrating a foundation that has already helped over 1,000 people." She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd. "But none of this would be possible without each and every one of you, without Helen, who had the courage to ask for help even when it seemed impossible, without Robert, who believed in me and gave me the tools to make a difference, without my brother Liam, who was always by my side, without Irene, Clara, and so many others who risked something to do what was right, and without each of you here today, supporting this cause, working with us, trusting us. She looked especially at the seniors present, some in wheelchairs, others with canes, all with attentive gazes. This foundation exists for you and because of you, because every human being deserves to live with dignity, with respect, with love. No one deserves to be forgotten, neglected, or abused. And as long as there is a single person suffering, we will continue to fight. The audience applauded warmly. Some were crying. Megan came down from the stage and was hugged by dozens of people, each one thanking her, each one sharing their story. Mr. Joseph was there, now 85, but strong and smiling. "Mrs. Brandon, you changed my life. I'll never forget it." A woman named Norma, who had been rescued from a situation of false imprisonment 6 months earlier, held Megan's hands. "You were my guardian angel. You literally saved me." Megan hugged each one, moved, remembering why she continued to do this work despite the difficulties. It was for those faces, those smiles, those transformed lives. At night, when everyone had gone home and the mansion had returned to silence, Megan and Robert sat in the garden under the stars. Gabriel slept peacefully in his stroller beside them. Helen had gone up to her room, tired but happy. "Do you realize how much we've already done?" Robert asked, holding Megan's hand. "I do, but I also realize how much is still left to do. There will always be more, but that doesn't diminish the value of what we've already achieved." Megan rested her head on his shoulder. "You know what I think about sometimes? I think that if I hadn't taken that job that day, none of this would have happened. Helen might not be here anymore. We would never have met. Gabriel wouldn't exist. All these people we've helped would still be suffering. But you did take it, because you are who you are, because you care, and because of that everything changed." They sat there for a long time, in comfortable silence, watching the stars, thinking about the past, but mostly about the future. There was still so much to do, so many lives to touch, so many battles to fight. But Megan wasn't afraid, not anymore. She had learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act in spite of it. She had learned that an ordinary person could make an extraordinary difference. She had learned that true love is built on respect, partnership, and mutual admiration. And she had learned, above all, that it's never too late to start over, to find purpose, to be happy. Her life had changed completely in 4 years, from a domestic worker struggling to survive to the director of a foundation, a wife, a mother, almost a graduate in social work. But deep down, she was still the same Megan, a woman with a heart too big for this world, but big enough to embrace it and try to make it a little better. And as she looked at Robert, at Gabriel sleeping, at the illuminated mansion in the background, at the starry sky above, Megan knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be, that every sacrifice, every tear, every sleepless night, every difficult moment had been worth it, because she wasn't just living, she was making a difference. And in the end, wasn't that what truly mattered? Robert turned to her, as if he had read her thoughts. "I love you, Megan Oliver Brandon, today, tomorrow, and always. And I love you, Robert. Thank you for giving me the chance to be who I always wanted to be." They kissed softly under the stars of Chicago, while Gabriel dreamed peacefully beside them. It was a perfect moment, the kind you keep in your heart forever. And when the wind blew gently, rustling the leaves of the oak tree, Megan closed her eyes and gave thanks. She thanked Helen for asking for help. She thanked herself for having the courage to act. She thanked all the people who had crossed her path. She thanked the family she had built. She thanked the life she had now. A life that began with suffering and sacrifice, but which transformed into love, purpose, and hope. A life that proved that stories can have happy endings when the right people meet at the right time. A life that was a living testament that it is worth fighting for what is right, even when everything seems impossible. And so, under the starry sky of Chicago, in a garden full of memories and promises, Megan finally found the peace she had sought for so long. The peace of knowing her life had meaning. The peace of being surrounded by love. The peace of having made a difference in the world, one person at a time. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Megan and Robert has touched your hearts. If you were moved by this journey of courage, love, and transformation, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments what part of this story resonated with you the most. Was it Megan's determination, the love between her and Robert, Helen's recovery, or perhaps the message that it's never too late to do the right thing? Every day, we bring you intense stories like this one, revealing the deepest side of the human soul, making us reflect on empathy, justice, and the capacity each of us has to make a difference in the world. We'll see you in the next episode with another narrative that will stir your emotions and make you believe that stories of overcoming adversity and true love still exist. Until then, and remember, you too can be the difference in someone's life.